The Stonecutter by Camilla Läckberg. Read by Eamon Riley. The lobster fishery was not what it once was. Back then, hard-working professional lobstermen trapped the black crustaceans. Now, summertime visitors spent a week fishing for lobsters purely for their own enjoyment, and they didn't obey the regulations either. He'd seen plenty of it over the years, brushes discreetly used to remove the visible roe from the females to make the lobsters look legal, poaching from other people's pots. Some people even dived into the water and plucked the lobsters right out of the pots. Sometimes he wondered where it would all end and whether there was any honour left among lobstermen. On one occasion there had even been a bottle of cognac in the pot he pulled up, instead of an unknown number of lobsters that had been stolen from it. At least that thief had some honour, or a sense of humour. Franz Bengtsson sighed deeply as he stood hauling up his lobster pots, but his face brightened when he saw two marvellous lobsters in the first pot. He had a good eye for where lobsters tended to congregate, as well as a number of favourite spots where the pots could be placed with the same luck from one year to the next. 3 pots later, and he had accumulated a passable heap of the valuable creatures. He didn't really understand why they commanded such scandalous prices. Not that they were unappetizing in any way, but if he had to choose, he'd rather have herring for dinner. They were tastier and a better buy. But the income from the lobster fishery was a more than welcome addition to his pension at this time of the year. The last pot seemed to be stuck, and he stood with his foot on the rail of the boat for a bit more support as he tried to wrench it loose. He felt the pot slowly begin to give, and he hoped it wasn't damaged. He peered over the rail of his old wooden sneeper to see what sort of shape it was in. But it wasn't the pot that came up first. A white hand broke the heaving surface of the water, looking for a moment like it was pointing at the sky. His first instinct was to release the line and let whatever was floating beneath the surface vanish into the depths again along with the lobster pot. But then his expertise took over, and he resumed pulling on the line that was attached to the pot. He still had a good deal of strength in his body, and he needed it. He had to haul with all his might to manoeuvre this macabre find over the rail. He didn't lose his composure until the pale, lifeless body fell to the deck with a thud. It was a child he'd pulled up from the sea, a girl with her long hair plastered round her face and lips just as blue as her eyes, which now stared unseeing at the sky. Bengtsson threw himself against the rail and vomited. Patrik was more exhausted than he'd ever thought possible. All his illusions that babies slept a lot had been thoroughly crushed in the past 2 months. He ran his hands through his short brown hair, but managed only to make it look even more tousled. And if he thought he was tired, he couldn't even imagine how Erika must feel. At least he didn't have to keep getting up at night to nurse. Besides, he was really worried about her. He couldn't recall seeing her laugh since she came home from the maternity ward, and she had dark circles under her eyes. When he saw Erika's look of despair in the morning, it was hard for him to leave her and Maya. And yet he had to admit that he felt a great relief at being able to drive off to his familiar adult world. He loved Maya more than anything, but bringing home a baby was like stepping into a foreign, unfamiliar world, with all sorts of new worries lurking behind every corner. Why won't she sleep? Why is she shrieking? Is she too hot? Too cold? What are those strange spots on her skin? Grown-up hooligans were at least something he knew about, something he knew how to handle. He stared vacantly at the papers in front of him and tried to clean the cobwebs out of his brain, enough to keep working. When the telephone rang, he almost jumped out of his seat, and it rang 3 times before he collected himself enough to pick up the receiver. Patrik Hedström. 10 minutes later, he grabbed his jacket from a hook by the door, dashed over to Martin Mullin's office and said, "Martin, some old guy out pulling up lobster pots, Franz Bengtsson, has brought up a body." "Whereabouts?" Martin said, looking confused. The dramatic news had broken the listless Monday morning at the Tanum Shader police station. "Outside Fjällbacka. He's moored at the wharf by Ingrid Berriman Square. We have to get moving. The ambulance is on the way." Martin didn't have to be told twice. He too grabbed his jacket
Sample complete. Ready to continue?